Welcome back to another episode of the Cool Your Jets podcast. I'm your host, Ben Blessington. It's been about a week since our last episode. We took a little break there after doing some film sessions with Thomas Hennessy and Bryce Huff and Mike DeVito. We had a lot of fun with those, and we do plan to have some more coming throughout the summer. We've been in contact with a few other Jets who have expressed some interest in doing them. So we're looking forward to coming out with some more film sessions, just because, you know, when you're in May and June and training camp hasn't started, there's not much to talk about. So it's kind of fun to sit down and talk with some current Jets. But Michael and I were sitting around and we were trying to decide what we could do when we didn't have a film session lined up. And we decided we would go and look at different Jets players and kind of do a deep dive into their season, behind the film, behind the analytics. You know, Michael obviously has the best analytics on Jets Twitter. And so looking forward to kind of hearing some of the numbers that he brings for each player. And then we'll look at some plays and talk about kind of their outlook for 2020 and just whatnot. Just a whole deep dive on each player. And we thought, what better player to start with than Le'Veon Bell? Because it was kind of an interesting 2019 season for Le'Veon Bell. I mean, he signed the massive 4-year, $52.5 million contract for the Jets. And, I guess you could say that he didn't play to that contract for sure, but, you know, how much of that was coaching, how much of that was the blocking, how much that was that, you know, his starting quarterback being out at the beginning of the season, and how much of that is regression. So Michael and I kind of wanted to start with Le'Veon Bell, look at his season, do an episode on him, and then, throughout the rest of the summer, we'll have some episodes on Sam Darnold and some other players that we can break down like this. But before we hop into that, Michael, how you doing, man? It's been a little bit since we talked. How's your quarantine going?
Yeah, going about as good as it can go. I mean, I just wrote a post on JetX with 100 reasons to believe in Sam Darnold. So clearly I have some time on my hands and plenty of time to go into this Le'Veon Bell film. So about as well as it could be going.
How did you even sit down and come up with 100 things?
I think it's something that I was born to do.
You're my inspiration, Michael. You can follow me, or you can follow the show. I guess that's me because I control the Twitter. But you can follow the show at CYJ Pod on Twitter. You can follow Michael, Mr. Big Shot, he now has the 10-point, K amount of followers on Twitter. You can follow Michael at Michael_Nania. What is it up to now? 10.4 or something?
I'm not the one who's counting. I think you are.
Losers focus on winners and winners focus on winners, I guess. And then you can follow myself and my measly 400 followers that I don't really tweet out from at Ben W. Blessington. It's more the CYJ Pod and the Michael_Nania accounts. You can also find the show wherever you listen to podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, whatever. We're waiting on our $100 million Spotify deal that came through for Joe Rogan. We're seeing if they have any offers left for Cool Your Jets. But you can also find the show at jetx.com. Just best place to go for Jets content in my mind. You can do a free trial if you don't want to pay, and just check out the content. It is worth it. A lot of hard work has gone into that site, and I'm just glad our podcast gets to be a part of it. But anyways, Michael, let's hop into it. Before we watch some of these plays, and we put a 7-minute video, which in film talks could be like an hour-long podcast. But before we hop into that, just kind of break down your thoughts on Le'Veon Bell's season. I mean, I talked about at the beginning of the show how a lot of Jets fans, or I guess fans around the NFL, don't really know how to take his season because he had some good moments, but most of it was quiet. And kind of similar to Sam Darnold in a sense, you don't really know how to get a read on the season. How much of that was just a terrible line in front of him? How much was that, the ineptitude of Adam Gase at times, and how much of that was rust, regression? Just kind of your thoughts on the Le'Veon Bell season as a whole.
Yeah, really, whenever I think of Bell and the season that he had for the Jets, all that really comes to mind for me is just how little help he got from this offensive line. And actually, as we'll get into, it wasn't just the 5 guys up front. It was the tight ends. It was the wide receivers. There were a lot of factors going against him, and that's not to make excuses for him because there were also some things that he could have done better. But I think overall, you look at the things that he had the most control over, being able to create yards after contact, make the first man miss, try and get, the most out of whatever was blocked for him on a given play. And then also in the passing game, what he did as a receiver, pass blocker, securing the ball. He didn't fumble. He fumbled only one time all season, so that's very good. Pass protection, as I said, was great. Didn't drop many passes. So the things that he had control over, he did a really good job with. And in the run game, he did, even though the production was not very good, to say the least, only averaged 3.2 yards a carry. He did, when you watch him play, would be hard to expect him to get much more than he did. So for the most part, I think with Bell, he did about as well as he could. But if the Jets are going to really unlock his elite talent, which we saw plenty of flashes of, if they're really going to unlock it, they're going to have to, quite simply just block a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that regression was, a factor in Le'Veon Bell's 2019 season, or do you think it was more of kind of what you just talked about with the surrounding parts around him? Because the first two games of the season against the Bills and the Browns, there was no question about it. We were watching the Le'Veon Bell of old. I mean, he might not have dominated the stat sheet, but it was, as you'll see through some of these clips, he had some great plays, some plays where he was just running into, three guys at the line of scrimmage, and he still was able to get 4 or 5 yards. But then, that first Pats game of the season, I think his yards per carry went down from like 3.5 to 1.8 or something. And it just was kind of a negative season, I guess, when he never really went back to, I guess, the heights of his first 2 weeks. Not like they were amazing. I mean, he did have some good games. He had the game against the Ravens toward the end of the season, which is something that Joe Douglas, the general manager, has pointed to as a sign for hope. But yeah, I mean, how much of this do you think was some regression for Le'Veon, and how much of this do you think was what you just talked about?
I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm making excuses for him, but I mean, for the most part, I really just think it really came down to the offensive line. And, this could be just an example of an even bigger picture that's beyond Le'Veon Bell and beyond the Jets, that a running back, wherever he's playing in the NFL, anywhere, just doesn't have too much control over his own production, and that the blocking, the offensive line just has a much bigger role in the production of the run game. So I really think it has a lot more to do with that than Bell himself. But again, in terms of what he can control, he did a pretty good job. So for the most part, I think it had to do with the offensive line. And hopefully if the line is better this season, we'll be able to kind of focus on him more and his ability to make guys miss, to, make the right reads. Because there just were not many holes for him to actually choose from. So it was hard to actually gauge his ability to choose the correct holes, to, run the correct way, and just be able to make good decisions overall. It's hard to do that when there aren't really any options to choose from. So hopefully we can get a better look. The Jets are obviously hoping, because they have a big contract decision to make with him after the season, that the offensive line does a better job so you can evaluate him better.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also one of those things where Le'Veon Bell's skill set. I mean, look, you don't want to give a guy, I think he's making something like $13 million a year, who relies completely on his offensive line. When you give a guy that type of money, you are hoping that he can, change the game himself. But the reality is of the running back position, and especially a guy with Le'Veon Bell's skill set, which is a guy with tremendous patience, tremendous vision, is always going to choose the right hole. He does need to have blocks in front of him. And that is kind of what goes to the argument of why you shouldn't pay a running back, or why the Jets should not have paid Le'Veon Bell if they didn't have a line in front of him. But the reality is he is a member of the New York Jets, and last year was just, as you said, it's really not an ideal situation for him. He was used to a line in Pittsburgh that was very good. It didn't even have to be the best in the league. He just needed competent blocking where he could sit, stop, make the right read, and get 5 to 10 yards every carry. In New York this past season, it was he would sit and there would be a guy in his face, behind the line of scrimmage. There wasn't much he could do. As you said, with the new blocking, Connor McGovern, Greg Van Roten, George Fant, Mekhi Becton, all the guys that Joe Douglas brought in, you're hoping to see an uptick in his production, like you said. So let's start here with some of the good plays of Le'Veon Bell season, probably some of the best plays of his year. And we'll start with this game. This is one that completely got buried because the Jets got buried themselves. And I actually believe the next play was Sam Darnold's fumble in this game. But Le'Veon Bell in this game against the Patriots, and unfortunately I was here in person, I thought this was probably his best play of the season. What are your thoughts on this, Michael?
Yeah, this was a great run. And this is an example of, again, and as we'll see with his good plays, what he can do when you can get him to the second level. You see great contact balance as he avoids that. Well, he breaks the first tackle, and then after that, he does a good job stopping on a dime and cutting upfield. But, the Jets actually blocked this well, and a big part of this actually is 93 there. He shifted inside before the play, and then that turns out to be the key hole that he runs through. That Winters actually does a decent job of opening up. But yeah, you see he shifts inside there from the 4 to the 3 technique. And that's what opens him up. But Beecham does a good, or Shell there actually does a good job of clearing the edge.
And he actually gets
and Thomas actually blocks for once. As we'll look at throughout this, you're going to see that that's a rare moment there from Demaryius Thomas.
He's done in this play already, though. He made his
he's already done. He's
clocked out.
That's enough. He's just kind of observing, just like we all were. Look at that. He still hasn't gotten in. But, from Bell, this was a great play. And really in so many of these games, the Cleveland game, this Patriots game, when they were getting blown out, you still saw him putting in a lot of effort. You could just see the motor and his will to just continue getting upfield on this play. So this was definitely one of his best.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you have any argument for any sort of regression from Le'Veon Bell's season, it could be that he did look a step slower. Maybe, but even if that's the case, his game was never, a long breakaway runner. He was always the guy that was going to wear the defense down and get you 5 to 10 yards every carry, and then occasionally have a big run like this. But I think the thing that stands out to me the most on this play is his balance right here. When he comes and he's just able to put his hand in the dirt there and keep going and falls forward. Obviously a smart run by Le'Veon Bell, but physically this was an impressive run for him and a guy that, you could have some qualms for how his body held up throughout the season. But I thought this was definitely his best run of the year. And could have broke it if he just breaks this last. If Kyle Van Noy doesn't chase him down, I was hoping for him to go for 6. Now this is another play, similar play that actually ends up getting called back. So it doesn't get really talked about, but it was a 3rd and long. I think it was like 3rd and 10 or something. And they call a draw, which is the Adam Gase special. But he does another really good job on this play of finding the open hole. And this looks a lot like 2016, 2017 Pittsburgh Le'Veon Bell, just in a great block there from Tom Compton. But you give him space and he makes something happen. Michael, just any thoughts on this?
Yeah, and this one was, I'm pretty sure this was a 3rd and long, a 3rd and 15. And that's why the Bengals have such a light front there. They only have 3 guys down on the line and only 2 linebackers. So it's a light front. He should be able to get a few yards out of it. But then he ends up picking up the first down on the second level there with just his vision at the second level. And something that you talked about, we were talking about before we started recording, is that as valuable as his vision is in the trenches between the tackles, just picking out the right hole, when he gets to the second level, he has that, that punt returner kind of vision where he's just reading blocks and just the stuff that's rapidly playing out the second level that's, not planned out. You don't know where your linemen are going to be going. He has that too. And it's that tackle right there about when he gets to the logo where he's able to kind of break that off from, okay, you got your 5-6 yards because they didn't have anyone up front, from that to then that tackle right there that he breaks. That's how he's able to get it to the next level and make that a really long conversion on about 3rd and 15, whatever this was. But Compton actually, I remember praising that block when we first watched this, but he's actually the guy who got called for the hold.
I was just about to say, yeah.
Grabs him on the leg, but good job by Compton. His one highlight actually turns out to be a penalty. But with Le'Veon Bell, again, this is what he does right here. These 15 to 20, these first 2 plays, these 15 to 20 yard runs are a specialty. Even in 2017, he led the league in carries with 321, and his longest run was only 27 yards. But he's still really efficient and productive because this is what he does. Lots of runs like this, even if he won't get even a 30-yard run he hasn't had since 2016. Even if he's not getting those, he just gets a lot of these runs, these 15 to 20s.
Yeah, I think and the other thing, and we talked about his patience and his vision, but Le'Veon Bell in open space is a dangerous man. You talked about that broken tackle. That was something we really didn't get to see much of all last year. We did get to see times where he'd make a great jump cut and be like, oh, look at that vision. And, or, he'd wait and the hole would open up. Look at his patience. But there weren't many times where we got to see this Le'Veon Bell. I mean, we saw it a little bit towards the beginning of the season against,
especially in the middle of the field, because they got some dump offs to him. And again, plays that we will look at, but they got some stuff along the sideline, but up the middle, you just did not really see him get to the second level like on this play.
Right. Le'Veon Bell in open space is obviously a dangerous man, but he's also dangerous catching the ball as well, as we'll see on this play. And he has a few catches that we'll show in this game. But it was one of the things that, and we're definitely going to talk about this, that we wanted to see the Jets do more of was flex him out wide as a receiver. But just noting this play, I think it's a great read by Sam Darnold on this play. If you watch Darren Orlovsky's breakdown of this play and why it's just such a smart throw and catch by Le'Veon Bell, but also just, he might not be running the hardest route or whatnot, but I mean, just his way to find the soft spot in the zone and utilize his hands. I mean, this is something that we definitely want to see more of in 2020. So I would say that this is up there with some of his best plays of the year.
Yeah, and he does a really good job of, like you said, he's not like, sprinting upfield. He does a good job of kind of feeling it out, getting past that underneath defender, but at the same time, not going too far upfield to where he's, going to those defenders over top. So giving Darnold the target to throw to, and then he makes the catch and takes hard contact and holds on to it. So again, showing his versatility, being able to get in the slot, run up the seam, make a tough catch in traffic.
Right. And this next play, I would say this is probably my favorite play of Le'Veon Bell's season. This is a 4th and 1, very painful game, the mono game. But this is, I believe it's the last drive of the game. Second to last, because I think the Jets got some kind of, drive with like 20 seconds to go in the game or something. But pretty much the game is on the line here, 4th and 1. And when you watch this in the broadcast angle, I mean, it's just like, oh, he didn't get it. I mean, I remember being upset and thinking the Jets lost this game. But the second effort he gets here, and we talk about the lack of – oh, never mind. My bad. My apologies. That's coming. We'll just, since we set it up, we'll go back to those plays. But when we talk about the lack of blocking that he got around him, I mean, this play was just absolutely amazing. The second effort he gets, I mean, he should have been tackled for a negative 2 or 3 yards, and somehow he fights forward to get the first down. So, Michael, just your thoughts on this play, and then we'll go back and show the runs that I just skipped.
Yeah, this is the first of many plays in which the blocking really wasn't there. And this is, like you said, a 4th and 1 play, so it's not like they're trying to pick up 15 yards here. But the first thing that stands out to me is Daniel Brown there on the edge does not do a good job of setting the edge and giving Bell that, because that's the point of attack. That's where they're trying to go. And Brown is, it looks like he looked outside first to try to get to the safety.
Right.
He didn't account for that, the edge defender there. So he cuts inside, and that's what should blow up the run. But Bell does what he does. He's pretty good in power situations. Converted and also from the backside, the defensive tackle gets in there.
Right.
But again, contact balance, like we saw in that Patriots run. His lower half is just so strong. If you're tackling him around his waist, his thighs, he's going to be able to power through it and get a few more yards. And here he breaks probably, I think, 3 guys here, it looks like. So you have 58 on the edge. I think it's 97 from the back and someone else. But he breaks a lot of contact here to get that 1 yard. And this is what he can do for you, because he had a lot of runs this season or games where he kind of produced a little bit better than the yards seemed, because he had these short yardage conversions. So This is a great play by him in spite of in a big spot too, in spite of poor blocking.
Right. And so then here's some other plays from Le'Veon Bell's season, both from the Bills game, which led to the little confusion. But I think this, and I'll just let these 2 plays run back to back, this is more of the Le'Veon Bell that we expected to get. And it's the Le'Veon Bell that you saw in Pittsburgh, that you just give him some blocking where he can dance around in the backfield, find a hole. He's going to take it, and he's going to get you 8 yards. And he's going to put you, ahead of the sticks in those 2nd and shorts, those 3rd and short situations. These were the type of – Le'Veon Bell might not be a, as we talked about, a home run hitter, a guy who's going to get you break off a 50-yard carry or something. But he is this type of runner, this type of consistent runner who wears down a defense. Give him a little bit, and he'll capitalize on it. We have some other clips to show later, but specifically from these games, I mean, this is Le'Veon Bell's bread and butter in my mind. You give him any sort of blocking, and he's going to – and as you said, his lower half is just so strong that guys just bounce off of him. But this is with – the hope is that with proper blocking, this is the Le'Veon Bell that you will hopefully see in 2020. And you saw a little bit more of it in the Ravens game, but really it was this game and the Ravens game where you got to see consistent carries like this throughout Le'Veon Bell's season. Michael, any comments on this before we move forward to some more clips? These ones are going to focus a little bit more on the surrounding talent around Le'Veon and how they let him down. But just any thoughts on these solid carries by Le'Veon?
Right, exactly. I think that's where he adds the most value, not necessarily with getting all of his yards in one play with 80 yards or big runs like that, but it's just being able to consistently get 7 yards instead of 3 yards, 5 yards instead of 1 yard. And that keeps the offense in front of the chains, keeps you in 3rd and 3 instead of 3rd and 7. That's where he adds value, and it didn't really come to fruition this season, largely because of the blocking. But in this Buffalo game, they were decent enough to where, and let's be honest, he was really on fire in this game, and he didn't quite get back to that level throughout the rest of the season. So because offensive line wasn't great in this game, it was just him playing really well. But Bell at his best is doing that, keeping the offense in front of the chains, helping the quarterback throw in these favorable third down situations. So while there are other backs who might put their head down, get that 50-yarder a couple times a season, they're also going to very consistently just run into a wall at the line and, put the offense into a lot of 3rd and 10s. While Bell, on the other hand, will sacrifice those two 50-yarders and put the offense in a lot of 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2 situations. So, but these two runs are really impressive. Just the quick, where his vision really helps is because his lateral quickness is so good, he's able to read it and then just instinctively make that cut. This one right here is really impressive, how he's able to so he gets up the middle here, and that linebacker gets into the hole, but he kind of falls away, and then he's able to react to the linebacker coming up the field and get back up the field. So he's just really able to instinctively see what's going on and use his quickness to take advantage of what's afforded to him. Because just on that run right there, he's able to change direction so many times. But these two runs and this whole Bills game really exemplified what he brings to the table.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and you look at his best seasons in the league, he was averaging nearly 5 yards a carry. He was averaging 4.9 yards a carry, and then this year he fell all the way to 3.2. So he's a guy that should be around the 4.5s to try to maximize his value. As we talked about, that's what he brings. That's probably his best skill, as we talked about, is that average yards per carry that he brings. But looking forward, some of the other hidden production that he brings is not just plays where he's just met right at the line of scrimmage and he can get 2 or 3 yards. It's in his blocking. I think that's something that Jets fans don't talk about enough. And if he is pretty much the prime reason that Vincent Smith scores his touchdown is this block that he sets here. And then even protecting Sam Darnold, he didn't do it too much this season to this level. But you look at that block that he sets here to set the edge. I mean, it gives Sam Darnold some time, something that Sam didn't really have that much this season. And it's one of his, if you want to be a top running back in this league, you have to be able to do this. And it's something that doesn't probably get credit enough for Le'Veon, but his blocking is certainly a part of his skill set.
Yeah, definitely. It's something that is hard to pay attention to when you're watching live. One of many things on TV. When you're watching the broadcast, you can't really notice that much. But like those two blocks are probably his best of the season. That one against Buffalo is really great. And obviously the one against Philadelphia where he sets the tone for Vincent Smith's touchdown. But his pass blocking is really efficient. He ranked at the 73rd percentile among running backs in terms of pressure rate allowed. Only 5 pressures given up over 68 snaps in protection. So he did a really good job in protection and also had that play against Smith for Vincent Smith in Philadelphia. So it's just one of a few different skills that he brings to the table, controllable skills that he does a really good job with.
Right. And it's one of those things where hopefully as the offense can build talent around, can have other sources of talent, that is something that shines. If the Jets had a better receiving group or, if Chris Herndon was on the field and Sam Darnold was able to go to those other guys, you'd probably get to see more of Le'Veon Bell's pass blocking. Instead, it's really, completely relied on him to make these big plays. For the most part, that was the case for last year and could be the case again this year as the Jets, receiving core is a bit of a question mark. But looking forward, now let's get to the part where I thought we were going to be at, which was where his teammates let him down. And this is, something that Le'Veon Bell saw far too many times last year, to be frank. I mean, just guys were meeting him right in the backfield immediately. And this is one of those plays where I marked it pretty much as hidden production, because if you look at it, I mean, he should be tackled right here. And he's able to shake that, and that would be, I think it's a 2-yard loss or something. But he's able to shake that and just plow forward and get to no gain. But this is something that he faced throughout the entire season. And if Le'Veon's going to have any – I mean, look, as a running back, you're always going to have plays like this where the blocking isn't there. But this is something I would say that Le'Veon saw on at least 75% of his carries, if not more. I mean, this play is just ridiculous. It gets absolutely blown up in the backfield, and they lose about 8 yards. This next play – was not necessarily poor blocking. I mean, it wasn't great blocking at the start, but this is an opportunity for Le'Veon to break this one back, as you'll see, against his former team. Look, the blocking isn't great here, obviously. I mean, he's met right in the backfield. But Le'Veon tries to cut this one back, and he actually has a chance. I mean, there's nobody up here at all. All Jonathan Harrison really has to do is take somebody who's in the play. So I would say Bud Dupree would be the guy to block. But instead, he goes and blocks the guy that I think I think it's Cameron Hayward, but I can't see. Yeah. The Le'Veon Bell has already shaken, and Bud Dupree gets him in the backfield. So if Jonathan Harrison goes and blocks, let's just let it run. If Jonathan Harrison goes and blocks Bud Dupree right here, because bam, Le'Veon Bell might have a chance to break that loose and at least get some, maybe back to the line of scrimmage, maybe even some positive yards. But it was just more examples of Le'Veon just not getting any help from his teammate. And you could really go throughout every single game. Here's another example of it. This is one where Jonathan Harrison just absolutely.
Yeah, there's plenty of examples of Jonathan Harrison throughout. And not to single him out because everyone pretty much deserves some blame, but the upgrade at center to McGovern, even though McGovern is only probably an average run blocker, his pass protection is where he's really good. But even an upgrade to average there is going to be so beneficial. Just look at Harrison on this run. They're running an outside zone play. And, the nose tackle's shaded to the play side. So he's got to get outside and pin him to the backside so Bell has room. But, his first step there is backwards. You can see compared to the rest of the linemen and also Chris Herndon at tight end, how unproductive, how wrong that is to, make that first step like that. And it lets the defensive tackle easily get out in front of this play. And then Bell has nowhere to go. He's to cut back and he gets stuffed. So, just a lot of examples of that. If you can go back to that first play against New England, I think 3 plays before this, one of the big issues that doesn't get a lot of attention is the tight end blocking. Daniel Brown and Ryan Griffin really struggled. On this play, I'm pretty sure it was Brown who gives up. It's actually Brown and Griffin are over there, but it's mainly Brown who gets knocked inside. And Griffin got beat too. He just, Brown got beat first, so he gave up the tackle. But tight end blocking was an issue. Those two guys really struggled. Griffin is a very solid piece as a receiver, but in the running game, saw a lot of this. And the same thing from Daniel Brown, who's the main culprit on this play. But Tron Wesco is going to be a big X factor. He improved quite a bit down the stretch as a run blocker, especially in that Ravens game. As you mentioned, Bell played really well in that game, and Wesco had a lot of the key blocks to help spring some of those big runs. So Wesco is going to be a big X factor because Griffin and Brown just do not cut it as run blockers. And Herndon as well Herndon is solid in pass protection. He's going to help there, but in the run game, he's not great either. So it's going to be big for Wesco to keep improving and give them a tight end who can really set the edge, because there are a lot of mistakes on tape that hurt Le'Veon Bell throughout this season.
Yeah, I think that was a really good point you made on this play. And talking about the tight end blocking, and Chris Herndon doesn't do too great of a job in this play either. He gets
we cut him some slack. This is the only game he played. He's out for the season after this. Herndon's a god. We give him all of the credit.
we can only hope. I mean, if he can make any sort of impact in 2020, I'll feel a lot better about the Jets' weapons. But I think that was a really good point you made on Jonathan Harrison's set on this play. When you see everybody slides right, and I would imagine that Jonathan Harrison maybe isn't supposed to slide all the way right like these guys do. Maybe if he can get any sort of push up the field, but instead he's getting pushed back and just shaken immediately. And this was the case far too often with Le'Veon Bell last year, was he was having to make one guy miss just to get to the line of scrimmage. And so I think that's one of the things, and I think Jets fans are sick of hearing the term hidden production, because it seems like we've had a lot of, supposedly good players that have had to rely on their hidden production. But Le'Veon Bell, this is one of the things that you can point to. The fact that this isn't a negative 2-yard loss right here. The fact that he's able to stick his foot in the ground here, cut and shake that guy, and then even get any sort of yardage here.
Yeah, those yards are just so valuable. Like, the difference in a couple of yards can change the value of the next down by so much. Like, just for example, I did an article recently where I was looking at, first down and second down, and the difference that a good tackle that Jamal Adams made that saved a couple of yards, how valuable that is. The difference in the first down rate on, I believe, 2nd and 7 and 2nd and 4 is about 10%. You're talking about a 45% first down rate against a 35% rate. So if you can save, like Bell does on that play right here, if you can save those 2 yards, you're making the next play much more favorable for your team just by breaking that one tackle. So, he gets 0 yards here, doesn't help anyone's fantasy team. It's ugly for his stats, but for the Jets, what should have happened here is he gets stuffed for a 2-3 yard loss because Harrison doesn't do anything to stop that one technique. But instead, he's able to shake that tackle, get back to the line or for a yard, and make the next play a lot more favorable for the offense. So that's really what you should be judging, not the total yards. What did he get versus what he should have gotten? And Bell does that well.
Right, and the average NFL fan is not going to have any idea of this play. So when Jets fans are arguing with the average NFL fans who are saying that Le'Veon Bell's washed or whatever, well, they point to the blocking in front of him. And look, I mean, I agree with you. I don't want to give a guy that the Jets gave a $52.5 million contract too many cop outs. But yeah, I mean, this was the reality of his 2019 season. This play right here is pretty much could look identical to 80% of the plays he faced. I mean, there was just always a guy in his face behind the line of scrimmage. He was always having to make somebody miss. On this play,
To Harrison's credit, though, you could see after that play he knew he messed up. He
knows
gives himself a little tap in the helmet. So
I mean,
Harrison's a great guy. I feel bad criticizing him, but it's going to be great to have McGovern snapping the ball next season.
Right. I mean, that's the hope, is that if Le'Veon Bell isn't being met in the backfield and just shaking a guy and getting back to the line of scrimmage, maybe he can get to the second level more often and get more of those 5 to 10 yard runs. And we talked about that is his biggest strength. But kind of going back to what you were saying about staying ahead of the sticks and the different, even, obviously it's a game of inches. I think that was something that Adam Gase really struggled with, was handling those second and long situations, those third and long situations. I think when Adam Gase was able to get into more of a rhythm. We saw that a lot in the opening drives where he would script, where he's able to get more of a rhythm where he was set up with, 4-yard gain. So it's 2nd and 6, and then you get, maybe they get the first down, or maybe he's facing 3rd and 3. I think he was okay as a play caller, but when he was really tested in those, 2nd and 12 situations, and to be fair to Adam Gase, I mean, he faced them. I don't have the numbers on this. I don't believe that you have the numbers on this either right now. But I would imagine that Adam Gase was faced with, and by effect, Le'Veon Bell and Sam Darnold were faced with some of the most 3rd and long situations or 2nd and long situations in the NFL. Yeah. And that's not a key to victory, especially when you have a guy like Le'Veon Bell, when the best thing that he brings to your team is keeping you out of those situations. And that first down, he can get you 4 yards. Now you're in 2nd and 6. And now your playbook is wide open. On 2nd and long, you can dump it off to him on pretty much any play and get between 5 and 10 yards. He's keeping you ahead of the sticks. That is what he brings to the table. He's not necessarily – that Saquon Barkley or that CJ2K or, a guy who's going to break off those big runs, as we've said numerous times in this podcast. But he is that. I mean, he is supposed to be the level of consistency that you see for a running back, because we saw it in his time in Pittsburgh, and you see flashes of it here in New York.
Right, and that's a great point, because the O-line, and you see on this play, like, he doesn't even have the ball yet, and that the one technique already has Harrison beat to the point of attack. There's nothing Bell can do at this point. See, he's got the ball, and he's already beaten to the point where he's supposed to be attacking. So that's a really great point you make, because what he does best was really canceled out by the offensive line. Because as nice as it is for him to turn the -2 into 0, as he did quite consistently, 2nd and 10, 3rd and 10 is still really hard to get out of. And he's not and the Jets did not really have the personnel to be able to get out of those situations, whether it's pass protection, having a receiver who's able to run a curl, run a quick fade, a quick slant to get those 10 yards. And as we've said, Bell is not the burner who's going to get those 10 yards in 3rd and 10. So not being able to have Bell get you into those 3rd and 2, 3rd and 4 situations definitely hurt, and the offensive line was a big part of that. So hopefully if they can just do a little bit better blocking, he could be able to get them into some more favorable 3rd downs.
Yeah, I mean, Le'Veon Bell has traits that he doesn't necessarily need the most amazing offensive line in the world to be successful, because at that point you could say he's a system running back. He has traits that are very, very valuable. All he needs is pretty much a competent offensive line to show what he's worth as a running back. If you give him a good offensive line, you're getting an amazing Pro Bowl running back. You give him a solid offensive line, you're getting a good, solid running back for this team. And I think that's the way you look at it. But you give him a bad running back, you're going to get a guy who, one, as we just talked about, you're limiting what he brings to the team as far as keeping ahead of the sticks. You're not allowing him to express, his patience and his vision. You're just limiting who he is as a player. And look, a bad offensive line does that for pretty much everybody, but especially a running back, and especially a running back with Le'Veon Bell.
Exactly. I looked at 2018, and not to say Isaiah Crowell not to say Isaiah Crowell was good, but it's like a kind of running back like him who puts his head down and gets a lot of big runs, can bail you out now and then, like we saw in the game against the Broncos that season, and the Lions game that season. Like, now and then he's going to break off an 80-yard run or a couple 20-yard runs in a game, and it'll make your run game look good. But over the rest of the season, he's getting, picking up a ton of stuffs behind the line, and that's where it all bounces out. And in those situations, Bell is getting back to the line of scrimmage. But a running back like that can now and then bail out a bad offensive line, and Bell is not really going to do that from a production standpoint. So I think Bell's the type of back who gets exponentially better the better his offensive line is, because what he does best is taking advantage of what his offensive line does. So the more they're doing, then it's just going to exponentially increase what Bell's bringing to the table. I
think you put that perfectly. So now let's go ahead and take a look at some of the stuff that he did well in Pittsburgh. And we'll show a play that what they ran in Pittsburgh, and then kind of what they did similarly in 2019 for the Jets. But a lot of these are things that we want to see the Jets do more of in 2020, and how they can capitalize on, yes, what we just talked about. But there were ways to capitalize on Le'Veon Bell's skill set, even with a bad offensive line. And I guess we'll just hop right into it. I guess the first would be throwing to Le'Veon Bell more on these little dump-offs and checkdowns. And I would imagine that part of the reason that the Jets didn't do too much of that was because they weren't comfortable leaving Sam Darnold, especially on those third downs and whatnot, where a lot of these dump-offs come from, weren't comfortable leaving Sam Darnold in five-man pass protection. They were worried about the pressure that was going to be on him. So a lot of times, Gase would leave a running back or an extra tight end or whatnot in the backfield. And look, when Gase has to choose between leaving a tight end to block or running back, if he has to choose one, we've seen Sam Darnold's success throwing to the tight end. So a lot of times I think that Gase would defer to leaving Le'Veon Bell or Ty Montgomery or Bilal Powell into block. But this is something that you can really take advantage of for Le'Veon Bell's skill set. Especially when you have a young quarterback like Sam Darnold, who's only 22. You have a guy like Le'Veon Bell who can just come up on these this little curl route, and I think this is a 3rd and 10 too, and he throws it to him pretty quick. But you have a guy like Le'Veon Bell, who we've already talked about how dangerous he is in open space. One, you're just feeding it to him in open space, but you bring a guy like Le'Veon Bell, put him on a little curl route, that also forces these linebackers to come down and these safeties to come down, and that opens up crossing routes for your tight ends or Jameson Crowder. It could even affect things down the field more. It's just Le'Veon Bell can be the vocal point of your offense without having the ball in his hands. And he can also be, a tremendous safety net. As we see here, they get the first down, gets into open space. That's 15 yards. Here's another example of it, which is, probably one of the dirtiest stiff arms I've ever seen. Ben Roethlisberger doesn't like what he sees, dumps it off to Le'Veon Bell, gets it to him in open space, and look what he does with it. He takes it all the way. This would have been one of the longest plays, if not the longest play of the Jets season. I guess they had the big touchdown to Robbie. And then here's another example of it that they used for Luke Falk, considering he didn't want to throw down the field. They dump it off to Le'Veon Bell. He gets a hurdle, and he gets a big gain. So this was one of the things that I wish we could have seen more of. I think part of it was, one, Sam's tendency to want to push things down the field. He has an aggressive mindset. But two, probably comes in hand with the protection. But if he can utilize Le'Veon Bell, instead of at times forcing it into triple coverage, if he can just recognize, look, let me just take it, let's say it's a 2nd and 10. Let me give it to Le'Veon Bell. Let's get 6 yards here. We'll be set up shop for 3rd and 4 instead of a 3rd and 10. This is something that Le'Veon Bell can help you with, regardless of how the offensive line is playing.
Yeah, and this play right here, I think, is something I think overall Bell not getting those middle of the field touches is mostly I think that's mostly criticism of Darnold. I think that's one of the biggest things he can do better is checking the ball down, being able to understand sometimes that the best play available is to just hit the man underneath, whether it's Bell in this situation. Like this right here is a great read. It's the absolute best play he could have made. It gives them a first down. That's beautiful right there. And this is exactly what he needs to do more of. And I think that could get Bell more involved.
Yeah, not to cut you off. Except I'm blatantly cutting you off. A lot of times you hear for a young quarterback, look for the check down, take, just like what you just said, understand that it's okay to make this check down. It's not only that for Sam Darnold, he has maybe the best running back in the NFL for the check down. So Not only is it something where he can take advantage of it, like, pretty much all young quarterbacks can, but not only are you taking advantage of it and, only getting 3 to 5 yards, this is a guy who can break it for, 20 to 30 yards. A lot of his biggest gains in the NFL aren't from runs. They're from little checkdowns like these. And people have compared Sam Darnold to Ben Roethlisberger at times, and I do see some similarities. This is something he can really pick up from Ben Roethlisberger. The ability to understand, look, it's a game of inches. Let me get my, this is something that Ben Roethlisberger, and even you look at a guy like Tom Brady made a living on, was these little dink and dunks. If the defense is going to give you Le'Veon Bell for 5 yards, take Le'Veon Bell for 5 yards, because one, that's 5 yards, and two, that could be 25, 30 yards. But continue with what you were saying.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the biggest thing for Sam Darnold in his progression is toning down his aggressiveness a little bit. You want to find a perfect middle ground. You don't want to be too aggressive. You don't want to be too conservative. You want to be able to read the situation in both, in terms of actually, scanning it, but also instinctively, just being able to feel out everything that's going on, understanding what the best decision is and executing it. And Darnold, I think a little too often is on the more aggressive end of the spectrum and leaves plays like this to Le'Veon Bell on the field. So having Bell around this year is going to be still really positive for him, because especially seeing the film from this past season, I think he's really going to be able to take a step back and look at some of the plays that he missed, trying throws downfield that were not very high percentage plays, when the best play available is a check down. And even in that Bengals game, a few plays after this one, I think, against the Bengals, there was a very similar play where Darnold did not check it down to Le'Veon Bell. And you can actually see a little bit of frustration from Bell for not getting the pass. It was later in this game, but this is something that Darnold can do better with. And having Bell around is, as you said, probably the best safety net in the league. So having him again should definitely help him progress. And Roethlisberger is a guy, and Brady as well, is you can just take a lot away from those guys. As talented as they are from an arm strength perspective, the elite quarterbacks know when it's time to check the ball down. Right. So having Bell is going to help Darnold do that.
Look, yeah, and Brady's dumping it off to James White, and
exactly.
Darnold gets to dump it off to Le'Veon Bell. No, this to James White, but Le'Veon Bell, especially in the open field and the way what he can do as a pass catcher, is just something that not really many other running backs, if any, bring to the table. But yeah, I mean, this is just a perfect example of Ben. Look, the Steelers running a pretty aggressive concept here with both AB and it might be Martavis Bryant. I don't really know. I can't tell. Running down the field. And Ben Roethlisberger looks, maybe I could try to fit that in there, but that safety's right there. I don't think I'm going to try Heath here. Hey, look, Le'Veon Bell's wide open. Let me just dump it off. And it ends up getting probably about actually more yards than any of those routes would have gotten to Antonio Brown and Martavis Bryant as he gets it all the way down to about the 15-yard line. So, yeah, I think this is something that, as I said earlier, if the offensive line is playing well, regardless, you can do it with the poor offensive line. But if the offensive line is playing well and Gase is more confident, just having 5-man blocking, it's something that will really open up for the Jets. And I think, again, I don't want to come down too hard on Adam Gase. But I think part of it was he was worried about the blitz, and so he would keep Le'Veon Bell in. Except, as somebody who's not an NFL coach, I think sometimes it would be, well, you're worried about the blitz, then give Sam Darnold this little check down. It wasn't like Le'Veon Bell was helping too much because Sam Darnold was still under pressure in under 3 seconds. You give him a little check down. If there's somebody in his face in that blitz, the blocking breaks down, he can still dump it off and get positive yards. And that's something that we saw a little bit earlier on in the season, but I felt like that faded as the year went on, that they didn't really use Le'Veon Bell as a security, as a safety net when things are covered, but also as a safety net when the blitz came through. So continuing on with something else that we want to see, and it's again Le'Veon Bell catching the football, but flexing him out wide as a receiver. I think this is something that Le'Veon Bell probably does better than any other running back in the league. That might be hyperbole, but especially in 2016, there was nobody better as far as running backs go playing receiver. And that was kind of the argument with, well, you're going to pay him and he's a running back, but he's really bringing more to the table. He's a receiver. And I don't think that was something we saw necessarily too much from Adam Gase's offense. I'm hoping that maybe with the addition of Frank Gore and drafting Michael Pirine, we might see more of it. But this is an example of what the Steelers did in the playoff game against Jacksonville, which is, again, just showing Le'Veon Bell's prowess as a receiver. You flex him out wide, and you're forcing either a linebacker to cover him or a safety to cover him. And a lot of times, if the safety has to cover him, then the linebacker is going to have to cover the tight end. It just creates a lot of mismatches when you have a guy who can do this. Obviously, tremendous catch. The Jets, I think this was the first play of the game offensively against the Raiders. Very similar concept. They flex him out wide. He's in the slot. He's going to run just like the play against Jacksonville. He'll run to the flat and then cut upfield. And I believe he, as I just said, let me make sure. Yeah, he actually has initially the linebacker goes to cover him, as you'll see up here. But then the safety, I don't know. I believe, I don't want to guess. But then it forces the linebacker to cover Ryan Griffin. And if that's Chris Herndon, and if Herndon can take the steps that we're hoping for this year, you're just creating mismatches all over the field. So that's something that Le'Veon Bell brings to the field that we didn't really see enough of in 2019 that I hope to see more of in 2020. But again, very similar route, different type of catch, but still a pretty amazing catch for Le'Veon Bell.
And that's a great point you made, the mismatches, because just being able to split him out wide, even if he's not getting targeted, can just change so much because he demands that respect. He's a guy that you have to think about covering man-to-man because he's just, so difficult to stick with. You can see some of the catches he makes in these contested situations. So even if he's not catching the ball, there are ways he can help out. And as you said, having Herndon back, and that's no slight to Ryan Griffin, who is a solid receiving tight end, definitely above average. But Herndon definitely has the skills to be a top 5 kind of receiving tight end, the all-around traits that you want in a star tight end. So it could just create so much for the entire offense. And, not many running backs can make catches like these two, this one against Jacksonville in the playoffs, and that one-handed catch against the Raiders. So, he was still 6th among running backs in receptions this past season with 66. And you could get that, or 7th among running backs with 66, but you could get that up even higher, especially if the Jets still lacking depth at wide receiver. You could get that number up even higher, get him even more of these touches in situations like this, in the slot, out wide, especially when you're splitting him out. Then you could, it helps you get a read of the defense when you can get a player in motion like that, especially out of the backfield, forces them to adjust. You can get a read on man or zone. It really helps out to have a guy who can do that.
Yeah, and he's just so good at it. And we have more plays later on in this that are different types of routes.
Yeah,
but again,
and it's not just because you can flex anybody out, move anybody, but you could put him out there and he can make plays like this. He can play slot receiver and produce like a good slot receiver. So the fact that he can do that helps a lot.
Yeah, and I don't think there are many receivers on the Jets that are coming down with this catch he makes here. And
No.
yeah, he's certainly a super talented receiver. And going back to that point about Chris Herndon, yeah, Ryan Griffin is I think, a great tight end number 2. I'm happy they signed him to an extension, but I think he's more of a possession type of receiver. But you put Herndon here with his vertical speed. You have a linebacker on him, just run him up the seam. And he's a man coverage. That because of the way that the defense just matched Le'Veon Bell. And it's like, yeah, that opens up things for Le'Veon Bell. We talked about how talented he is as a receiver. But if that's Chris Herndon running at the seam, you're most likely going to have an open guy right here. So
I have a lot of experience doing that in Madden. I know it works.
Yeah, I mean, you hot route the tight end to a seam, you flex out the receiver, or you flex out the running back. And believe me, I know all the money plays. But yeah, I mean, I just think it's one of those things where, again, just like the dump offs, I think it did come down to the lack of confidence that Adam Gase had in his starting 5 up front. I think that Pittsburgh did it probably better than anybody, coming out in these little empty formations. I'm trying to get to it. Coming out in these empty formations where you can get a read, as we just talked about, on the defense and flexing Bell out wide, but you're really only capitalizing on those mismatches if you're coming out in empty like this. And I guess you can block the tight end, but just with the way that things were going for Sam Darnold, I mean, he was really having 2 to 3 seconds to make these throws. And I think that was hopefully part of the reason they didn't run too many of these. But I would love to see more empty plays, especially if the offensive line can play better, flexing Le'Veon Bell out, taking advantage of the tight end mismatch, and then also throwing it to him. It's just another way to get him the ball, especially if the run game isn't working. Moving forward, I think another thing that we want to see is more of these outside runs. I think we talked, and you alluded to it a little bit earlier, but this is something that we were talking about before we started recording, that, look, you can take advantage of Le'Veon Bell's patience and vision, and he doesn't have to be, running right up the middle and jumping, in between the tackles. You can give it to him in a situation like this, where he gets to read it. One, he's in open space, so you're taking advantage of that. He's most likely going to have a one-on-one. Again, maybe Gase didn't have the confidence in his offensive line to flex out or have the athleticism to come out. Maybe that's a positive with the drafting of Mekhi Becton, bringing in George Fant, and hopefully the development of Chuma Edoga, that maybe Gase is going to be more confident and, running his tackles out wide and in these athletic type of scenarios. But you don't even have to. Just giving Le'Veon Bell the ball outside in open space and allowing him to still use that patience and still use that vision, but in a way that's, running more east-west than north-south. Look how much, look how many yards he gets on that play. This is something that the Jets did run a few times I think both these clips are actually from the Browns game. And this is a 3rd and 3 or something. And Le'Veon Bell powers forward. He takes the one-on-one and he gets the first down. It was a positive play. But I guarantee you, you run that ball up the middle, and just looking at the way that the Jets were run blocking, I don't know if he's getting that first down, but you give it to him outside and he can take advantage of it. He makes good things happen on the outside. And I think that was one of the things that was so frustrating about the Bengals game, was because the Bengals were so bad at defending outside runs, and Gase just kept pounding the rock inside instead of doing things more like this. Give it to him open space. Look at that. I mean, he just shook that guy with ease, and he gets 8 or 9 yards. So I think that's another thing where if the run game isn't happening up the middle, you can flex, you can bring him on these outside runs, and he's going to take advantage of it. It just capitalizes on that patience and that vision.
I like that you brought up the Bengals game, because that was the game where this kind of really stood out as a criticism, because the Bengals came into that game as I believe the worst defense in the league against outside runs in terms of yards per carry on runs directed either right end or left end in the play-by-play, and the Jets didn't run a single one of those in that entire game, and they didn't run the ball a lot because they were trailing pretty quickly. You had to Darnold threw almost 50 passes in that game, but the runs that they did call in that game, none of them were to the outside. So it just wasn't, and that seems like a pretty consistent criticism of Gase going back to Miami, in which he's kind of just not stubborn, but just not doing the best of job, kind of playing to the weaknesses of the opponent, the strengths of his team, just kind of reading the strengths and weaknesses of both sides. And it really stood out in that Bengals game. So I think that was a legitimate criticism, but at the same time, and we're kind of, giving him the whole team this disclaimer for everything. The Jets did not really have the personnel to do that. And Brandon Shell, you can see on this play, he is a guy who had some athleticism to kick out. But overall, Kelvin Beachum, you cannot run outside behind him at all. And, he actually had a pretty nice block on the backside there. But this is one of the few successful runs, so it's not like it's representative. But Kelvin Beachum is not a guy who can kick out and run behind at all. He's a very clean pass protector, but in the run game offers very little. And Shell on the other side, for as many nice blocks he had like this, there were a lot of not so great blocks, which he wasn't able to
maybe
get
3
out.
times as many not so great.
Yeah, maybe for every one of these, there was a whole game of not good blocks. So you do give Gase, the excuse, and it's legitimate, of not having the personnel to really run outside as much, because it does take kind of more unique physical ability than running up the middle probably does from your offensive line. So you do give them that. And hopefully with kind of a theme throughout some of the additions they made up front, Mekhi Becton, George Fant, some guys who have some athleticism and can move. Connor McGovern as well has experience pulling, getting to the second level. So the athleticism they've added, it seems like that it could be a goal to kind of get that outside run game going and give Bell more opportunities to, be a punt returner, as I said earlier, just instead of reading blocks, kind of reading gaps, just getting into an open field situation and making guys miss like he does on these couple of plays. And also just using his nose for the sticks, which he has, which is another one of his great traits. He knows where the marker is. He's willing to, pick up only 3 yards. If 3 yards is a first down, he's going to get 3 yards, and that's what he can do. So hopefully these athletic offensive line additions actually prove to be useful in the outside game. And, you can point to athleticism all you want with Fant and all these guys, but, hopefully actually transfers into good outside blocking to get Bell going on plays like these.
Yeah, and I think, and this is something that we actually have a few plays for in a minute, but I think another reason, you talked about the personnel, that the Jets didn't have the personnel to run these type of plays, and you talk about the tackles and the offensive line, but again, with the receivers and the tight ends, the blocking from those positions was pretty terrible for the Jets.
Yeah, and tight ends as well, I didn't bring up. Tight ends are huge in that outside game.
Yes. I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, and I think, I don't know how Ryan Griffin does in this. Actually, Ryan Griffin does a good job in this play, and that's part of the reason they're able to do it. But yeah, if Trayvon Wesco can take the next step, if Chris Herndon can come back, well, I hope he's coming back, but that'll obviously help these outside run situations. But again, it's the receivers a lot of the times that make or break whether a run is going to be, 10 yards or it could be 25, 35 yards. And with the Jets having outside blocking of Robbie Anderson and Demaryius Thomas, both of whom really had no interest in blocking. I think Robbie did try, but, with his 6'3", 190-pound frame, he wasn't really built for blocking. And Demaryius Thomas, I think he brought a lot of veteran leadership and he made some solid plays. But in the run game, I mean, he was probably the worst blocker I've ever seen as a receiver. And you'll see a play later on where he just completely gives up. But I think that was another reason why they were not able to run these outside type of runs. Now, I think Denzel Mims, from what I've seen in his college tape, I think that was one of the things that really stood out to me as a positive, that his blocking was pretty superb. So I'm excited to see if Le'Veon Bell can capitalize on that, specifically in these outside plays. I don't know about Brashad Perriman. Michael, I don't know if you have more of an understanding of Brashad Perriman's blocking skills.
Yeah, Perriman's run blocking grades are typically around the 40th percentile, so a little below average. But the Jets did have, according to Pro Football Focus, the second worst run blocking grade at wide receiver last year. And Robbie, as you said, he tried. Robbie did give a pretty good effort, I think. But, at his physique, he's not going to make much of an impact. But Thomas, and we have a good example coming up, Thomas's effort at times was just not excusable, and that really hurt them. But Denzel Mims, as you said, his tape, you turn it on, his willingness to block, and not only that, just his technique and strength and drive to actually make productive blocks, push his man downfield, really stands out. Mims should really help. Perriman should be decent, so that should help as well.
Yeah, and I think that will really open up the playbook, having guys who can block on the outside, because it's obviously just something that the Jets could not do at all last year. Now, looking forward to these next few plays that are coming up. Again, I think we talked about this a little bit towards the beginning with some of those Buffalo plays, but I think this is another example, because many Jets fans watched Le'Veon Bell in a Jets uniform, but didn't get, I would assume people saw him in a Steelers uniform, but didn't maybe watch his full games that he had for Pittsburgh. So just, again, to just show the type of running back that Le'Veon Bell is, it's this type of running back. You give him any sort of space, and he's going to get you these 10 yards. I think it was just a perfect play to display this. I think he maybe gets 12 or 13 yards in this play. But this is something that if the blocking can improve, these are the types of runs that you want to see Le'Veon Bell have consistently throughout the year. We saw a little bit in the Ravens game. Look, he had good blocking, especially Wesco in that play, and he gets 12, 13 yards. That was vintage Le'Veon Bell. Even in this game, not the best blocking, but you give him a little sliver, bam. Again, I think it's Wesco.
Wesco again.
And he's taking advantage of
Gronk.
that. Baby Gronk. And he's taking advantage of that. And so that's the type of runner that you want to see. And that's, again, comes back to the offensive line. If they can just give him something. And I think what these clips just demonstrate is that he doesn't need amazing blocking. I mean, this blocking is actually pretty good in this play. But specifically with that Eagles play, he doesn't need amazing blocking. He just needs some sort of blocking. Guys who can give him some sort of chance to get to that second level, and he's going to make teams pay.
Yeah, and let's give Brian Winters some credit in that Eagles run. He sent Fletcher Cox to the ground on that play, and that's kind of what springs that one. But Wesco on both these runs, you could see the value of having, Wesco's, a fullback or an H-back on these two plays.
Hold on. I want to go back and acknowledge you. You're right. Brian Winters does absolutely just shove Fletcher Cox to the ground.
Let's give him some credit where it's due.
He didn't even try. He wasn't even trying. He just literally.
Winters has those. His high points are about as good as anyone's. It's just that they're not very consistent. But Wesco stands out in these two plays, and it shows the value of. And again, he's not a tight end here, but it's just the non-offensive linemen, how important they are, and Robbie too on that play, taking Marcus Peters down the field. So it just shows what a committee effort that a successful run play is. Harrison actually does what he didn't do in that Giants play and gets to the play side, takes that guy, pins him to the backside. Khalil on that play knocks someone down. But you see, these are just, pretty good 15-yard runs. How many good blocks are pointing out? Even Ryan Griffin gets to the second level there and doesn't really throw the block, but is able to, keep that defensive back out of it. Just so many. It's such a committee effort to make these plays happen. Only one guy needs to get to the ball to make the tackle. And then you see the Steelers did a great job on that inside zone play, but it's such a committee effort. So if you have bad run blocking tight ends, bad run blocking receivers, bad center, bad guards, bad tackles, it's not going to work no matter how good your running back is. So hopefully the Jets with these, new additions on the offensive line, Wesco's progression, and also Denzel Mims and Perriman at receiver, you can have a more just simply better run blocking.
Right, and look at the Steel, and you talk about how it's it's really just one unit. And you see how well Pittsburgh plays as one. They're in 12 personnel, which is something that I expect the Jets to run fairly often in 2020, with Chris Herndon and Ryan Griffin, or maybe that's Trayvon Wesco in this case, since it's going to be a run. But yeah, I mean, they just work together. I mean, 74 passes on to 66. Le'Veon Bell takes it up the middle. I mean, it's a lot of times it looks like it was 5 one-on-ones for the Jets, whereas the Steelers, it was just a one-on-one. And I think that's something that, I think the Jets may be affected on the offensive line with this whole, how long the quarantine lasts, and if they're able to get in the field together and build that chemistry. Because if they're able to build that chemistry, you're going to see more runs like these from Le'Veon Bell. But it's going to take some time. But yeah, I mean, if they can just get some sort of space for Le'Veon, he makes these plays happen consistently throughout a game. This isn't just like something that'll have, for the Jets, we saw it maybe once a game, if that. It was more like once every 3 games.
Yeah, like you'll notice that most of these good plays, other than the Browns and Bills game, it's just like 1 per game.
Right. But these type of runs, you can expect in Le'Veon Bell behind a good offensive line 4 to 5 times a game. And I think that was something you saw perhaps even more. That's the type of runner he is. That's the volume type of runner that he is, that he can just get these yards, these tough yards. And it's just so valuable to a team. I think that was part of the reason why people looked at Le'Veon Bell as arguably, at time, there was a time where people thought Le'Veon Bell was arguably the best player in the league. It's because
he came into the season as the all-time leader in scrimmage yards per game.
Exactly.
And he's still number 2 behind Ezekiel Elliott.
Okay, well, there you go. I mean, it's obvious what he brings to an offense, but this skill set of staying ahead of the sticks, getting these tough yards, that vision and that patience, which is reminiscent of Curtis Martin in a ways, to just get positive yards and keeping ahead of the sticks is just going to be so valuable for this team. And it really comes down to that offensive line. That's something that Joe Douglas knew. And I'm hoping that we'll see the fruits of Joe Douglas's labor this offseason. Obviously, the offensive line isn't completely rebuilt yet, but it's a lot of steps in the right directions. Even just the upgrade from Connor McGovern to Jonathan Harrison to Connor McGovern is going to be absolutely massive. And that's not counting, Mekhi Becton, if he can reach his ceiling, or if Chuma Doga takes the next step, if George Fant is anything, bringing in Greg Van Roten to replace Tom Compton. These are the things that I'm really looking for. And who knows, maybe Larry Warford could be a signing for the Jets. I mean, this is just it really all starts up front for the Jets. It starts up front for every team, but especially when you have a young quarterback like Sam Darnold who loves to dance around in the pocket and create and make some magic happen. And when you have a running back like Le'Veon Bell who loves to dance around in the backfield and wait and, flex his patience and his vision, an offensive line is just so key. And I think that was part of the reason. And you can even go back to Adam Gase's scheme. Obviously, every team needs a good offensive line, but when you look at the Jets situation, it was just so integral to their success, and that's, I think, a huge reason. Obviously, it was a huge reason, but when you look at their personnel, it was obviously just not going to work for the Jets unless they had good blocking up front.
Yeah, it was definitely because, as you said, when you don't have – Jets didn't have a star number 1 wide receiver to rely on, didn't have that at tight end with Herndon out. So
I don't even think they need that. I think they just need competent blocking.
Right, exactly. Like, and that's like the point I was trying to make, like how key it was for them. Like if you just, and we've seen it with Darnold, when they block well for him, when he's been pressured on fewer or less than 34% of his dropbacks, which is about league average, it's only happened in 8 of his career starts. The Jets are 7-1 in those games. They've scored 29 points a game, and his passer rating has been 108. And he's averaged about 9 yards per attempt, which are obviously incredible numbers. So he's shown that you protect him, he's going to take advantage better than most other quarterbacks do.
Yeah, and especially if you can keep him, as we've hammered on this podcast, if you can keep him out of these second and third and long situations, that's what Le'Veon Bell can do for you, and that's what a good offensive line obviously can do. I'm wondering, did you pull that? Was that part of your 100 reasons to be hopeful for Sam Darnold?
It was in there. Go check.
I was hoping.
One out of the 100.
You can check that out at Jets X Factor. Another one, and again, this is very similar to what we talked about earlier, which was using Le'Veon Bell out as a receiver. This is a different type of play. Maybe I should have lumped these together, but this is a different type of route from Le'Veon Bell. It's not just him running up the field, and we talked about the personnel mismatches. Again, I mean, they're in an empty set for Ben Roethlisberger, which I think is something that, as we talked about, that Adam Gase was nervous about. But you flex Le'Veon Bell out wide. He's the primary receiver on this play, or he just runs a beautiful route inside. And Ben gives it to him, I think, in like 2 seconds, and he breaks a tackle and brings it in for a touchdown. That's what he can bring as a receiver. It's not just those deep routes or setting up the mismatches. It's just easy yards for Sam Darnold. We talked about the checkdowns, and we talked about, flexing him out wide and throwing to, down the field. But if you can give him these little 5-yard hitch routes, if there's any sort of off coverage, run exactly what he just does right here. 5 yards, bam. A lot of times he's going to shake that tackle and get the first down. Even if not, you're still staying ahead of the chains. I think it was just one of the things that he did absolutely flawlessly for Pittsburgh, and that's something that hopefully with a confident if Gase is confident in his offensive line, we can see more of this in 2020.
Yeah, there aren't many running backs who can make that play. That one for Pittsburgh there. This one right here. So Ben sees that he's got the slot receiver and man-to-man. He's going to the flat. The safety is deep. There's no one in the middle of the field. So Bell runs call that a post, a skinny post, whatever you want to call it, but towards the middle of the field. He knows he's got that. There aren't many running backs who can, go out wide like that and be the first read and catch a pretty contested ball like that. It's not the best coverage. He probably shouldn't have undercut that route. Probably should have just stuck with them and tackled them. But still, there aren't many running backs you could put out wide and have as your first read and throw a deep pass like that. Yeah, Bell just bring that to the table.
Yeah, and I don't know who this linebacker is, but he's pretty terrible as he allows this touchdown. I mean, he's pretty awful.
Yeah, he's no C.J. Mosley.
Yeah, he's definitely no C.J. Mosley.
Actually, is that C.J. Mosley? Yes, we say that. Oh my gosh,
C.J. Mosley.
Did we really just do that? I think that is him. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was the joke.
What is wrong with us? Really? I was. All right. I thought it wasn't him.
That was the joke. You think I was just shitting on some random Baltimore linebacker? It's right there.
Oh, my gosh. Not C.J. Mosley's brightest moment there, but he had a nice game against Buffalo. Thanks for that.
I feel like, Michael, we have a pretty good rapport, and we normally bounce off each other well, especially with our senses of humor, but I'm pretty disappointed in you that you didn't pick up on what I was laying.
At least it's not as bad as that one joke that we cut out that these people are luckily never going to have to hear in their lives. But, back to Le'Veon Bell. He's great.
More throwing to the ball to Le'Veon Bell, and this is more of, again, this isn't out of the backfield. These are designed throws. Actually, this is a screen, actually, my bad. Throwing screens to Le'Veon Bell. I think that was something that we didn't really see much of at all from Adam Gase. And again, this is, I would imagine, as we've said it maybe 100 times in this whole podcast, it goes back to his lack of confidence in the offensive line. But Le'Veon Bell, again, you're giving it to him in open space, and he's able to use that patience, that vision, read his blockers, upfield. And I think, here's a play that one of the few times he used a screen, just Luke Falk dumping it off. And I believe he gets, close to the first down. He hurdles actually out of bounds. But that is another way you can use Le'Veon Bell. And another way that I hope the Jets use Le'Veon Bell is just on these little screen passes. Just give it to him in open space and just let him work. And I think that was a big thing, is he didn't get the ball in open space as much as I would have liked.
Yeah. And this screenplay against Pittsburgh, or with Pittsburgh, probably one of the best examples of the Jets not having great personnel, because, this screen to Bell, look at Pouncey on this play.
Let's go back.
Drive his man, 5, 10, 15, almost 20 yards downfield. I don't think Jonathan Harrison would have been doing that, or Ryan Khalil. Connor McGovern, though, I think he's capable of doing that.
Yeah, with Connor McGovern's athleticism, that is one of the things, pulling on screens and pulling on counters for running backs or whatever. But Connor McGovern can get down the field and block. So hopefully that's what Joe Douglas's master plan is building more of these athletic.
Yeah, absolutely. And this here is just a good play call. It looks like, I'm not sure what the down distance was, but it looks like it's a 3rd and long.
Yeah, Lewis actually does
second and long.
Yeah, but, I think it was.
You see, he gets plenty of space. You can see that the Eagles are playing the sticks and have everybody back. So
right.
This might have been 3rd down. He didn't actually get there. That's why it looks better. But still, just shows you can get him in space, and he'll be able to get the most out of what's blocked for him.
Yeah, Lewis actually does a solid job.
Yeah, he actually does here. And I like Alex Lewis, but blocking the second level is not one of the things he does well. So this is not a norm here, but he does a good job with this play.
And this is another example, again, when we talk about screens, it goes hand in hand with the outside runs, is receiver blocking, as we were just talking about. And look, Robbie Anderson does his best effort and actually takes this guy out of the play for a few seconds, but that's pretty much all Robbie Anderson's going to do. And this guy pops right back up and basically tackles Le'Veon Bell out of bounds. But if that's Denzel Mims and Mims can
exactly, like if that
hold
is
that block,
like look at like his guy makes a tackle, and this is again not to blame Robbie, like you said, he tried, he did his best,
and
about
53
the
is
best he
close
could
it down.
offer.
Yeah,
Right, exactly. But if you get that guy, pushed up the field, and it's hard, that would be an elite play if you did do that. But he could have had a chance to maybe even if he doesn't get to the sticks, get close to the sticks. The Jets are probably down 30 at this point, so they could have maybe gone for it. So it definitely comes into play a lot more than most people not just realize, but even kind of discuss as much as it really should be.
And I will say, I think that is something from the 2015 and 2016 seasons that the Jets did actually fairly well with Quincy Enunwa and Brandon Marshall, and even Eric Decker at times was receiver blocking. I think that was something that really helped out their offense, and it's something they've been lacking ever since. We're hoping that Denzel Mims and Rashad Perriman is a step in the right direction. But yeah, hopefully more screens, more passes to Le'Veon Bell out of the backfield. That's what we're looking for here. Now, this next play is exactly what we've been talking about the whole time. It just fits right in with what we're saying. Receiver blocking. I'll move this little thing out of the way. But Martavis Bryant in this play allows Le'Veon Bell to get an extra 15 yards. I mean, it's good blocking, and again, it shows Le'Veon Bell's vision and his ability to bounce runs outside. Again, solid blocking, but he bounces this outside. But look at Martavis Bryant. I think that's actually might not be Bryant. I can't tell. It might be somebody else. I don't want to give it's 83. So I thought Martavis Bryant was 10. So never mind. 83 gives a pretty amazing block in this play. And again, it just goes to what we've been talking about, how bad the Jets have been at receiver blocking and how much that can help a player like Le'Veon Bell in open space.
Yeah, exactly. And that block right there adds about 10, 15 yards. Even though it doesn't look all that impressive, you just have to consider that most of the time that receiver isn't holding that block. He's letting that DB get right in there, and Bell, as soon as he bounces that run outside, that DB should be right in his face right here at that point. Or if not, at least at the 20-yard line. But he holds it outside, and Bell's able to get another, 10, 15 yards as a result of that block. So that's where yards at the second level, that's where receivers really make their impact as blockers, with those extra yards at the second level. Jets did not get a whole lot of what 83 here does for the Steelers. Right.
And it's not even just holding the man the entire play like 83 does. And as you'll see in this next play that we'll show from Demaryius Thomas, even if 83's man loses, is able to shake 83, I'm trying to speak here. That forces Le'Veon Bell to change his angle, and that leads to the safety getting here faster, maybe this safety getting here and affecting the play. Just the fact that he's able to hold it for a second just allows Le'Veon Bell more time and creates more of a lane for him. As we'll see in this next play from Demaryius Thomas. Look, Demaryius Thomas on this ball, let's just watch it, and then I'll explain it more. Again, pretty poor blocking all around, but Demaryius Thomas has a wide open shot at Landon Collins. And even if he doesn't hit Landon Collins, this kind of goes to what I was trying to say. Even if he doesn't make contact with Landon Collins, even if he's able to just come here and not touch Landon Collins, Le'Veon Bell can see that. That's now a new hole, and he can use Demaryius Thomas as a pick and run, between them. And he might get tackled from Janoris Jenkins here, but again, it's a one-on-one with a corner, which Le'Veon Bell is quite good at. He might power over him. At the very least, even if it gets taken down, that's 5 to 7 yards, and that was just something that was missing. So it's not just on these outside runs. It affected the Jets. Tight end and receiver blocking affected the Jets on pretty much every running play. And this is just another example of it. It's just all he has to do is come in, and instead he sees it and then fades away.
Yeah, exactly. And it's odd because, to be fair, he's a lot of ground to cover. So we don't know if he would have gotten there, but he knows this is his assignment. He knows he's down blocking. He's eyeing it down the entire time. Just get in there, shove him up the field, and define that gap for Bell. And that's a big part of run blocking, defining gaps, giving the running back an easy decision to make. And doing this, just kind of standing in no man's land, is not going to help Bell that much. So, he's got to come against a hard-hitting safety coming aggressively downhill, right to line of scrimmage. All Thomas has got to do is get in there, get his hands into Jabril Peppers' hips, and send him up the field, and Bell can breeze right by through that B gap, and then he'd have one-on-one much further down the field against the cornerback. So just not a good job by Thomas, and there are too many examples of this throughout his film with the Jets.
Right, and you talked about defining gaps. And look, he doesn't even have to make contact with Landon Collins. That's my point. All he has to – he might eventually.
Exactly.
All he has to do is come here.
yeah, I'm not sure if this was Collins or Peppers. I think it was
Peppers. Sorry.
Yeah,
It's Peppers.
I think it was Peppers. But he can see in his peripheral vision that Thomas is coming down. So if he's coming down, he's going to adjust to that and try to curve around it and get Bell from behind. And that gives Bell, the leverage to get upfield. So it's just not a great effort from Thomas.
And I think Thomas gets confused because he can't decide whether to block 21 or I guess we'll just Jabril Peppers or Janoris Jenkins. But in this case, you always want to take the guy who's going to have the free shot because
you always want to get, it's just a simple, concept with all levels of football. You want, just like when you're pass protecting, you want to block the man who's closest to the quarterback. And kind of like we talked about in that one interview with Mike DeVito, you want to block the man who's closest to the quarterback. If you're going to leave someone free, let it be the defender who's farthest away from him, so he's the most time. Here, if you're Thomas, should be an easy decision. Just come down, block Peppers, and let Bell have that one-on-one with Janoris Jenkins. So just I said not a great effort. That's being very respectful. It's a bad play from Thomas, and it kills this run play for Bell. So way too much of that from him.
And it's not like the blocking on this play is great at all. I mean, Herndon I think that's Leonard Williams and Chris Herndon. I mean, it's a tight end on a defensive tackle. Or actually, never mind. Leonard Williams over here, so I don't know who this is. But it's good enough blocking. I mean, you're not going to have perfect blocking on every play or wide open holes. You're just looking for 4 to 5 yards. And instead, this is a loss for 1. But as I was saying, it's like, if Thomas goes, I think he's just, he can't decide. But if he takes Peppers, it's like you're giving Le'Veon Bell an opportunity in the second level with momentum in space to make a cornerback miss, as opposed to a safety coming downhill when you don't have much momentum at all because you're jumping around in the backfield. It was a bad play by Thomas, and it was something that we saw a lot of throughout the entire year. It didn't relate to Le'Veon Bell, so I didn't throw it into this deep dive of Le'Veon Bell. But I think it was the end around, or never mind, excuse me. It was probably Sam Darnold's best throw of the whole season to Robbie Anderson when it was like 3rd and 1 or whatever. He decides not to run. He throws it back across his body, and Robbie's running. Robbie probably has a touchdown if Demaryius Thomas just holds his block. But instead, Demaryius Thomas is like waving in somebody to come block, and he doesn't do a good job at all of blocking. So that was an issue for the Jets, not only in the running game, but also in creating opportunities downfield for the receivers. Not to shit on Demaryius Thomas too much. I mean, he did bring some positive qualities to the Jets in 2019, and there's a very good chance he'll be back in 2020. But his blocking is certainly not one of them. Now, looking forward again, this goes back to what we were talking about. Not just screens, not just dump-offs, not just throws to Le'Veon Bell as a receiver, but again, design throws to Le'Veon Bell out of the backfield. This angle route is perfect, perfectly thrown by Ben Roethlisberger, but it's perfect for this defense. And look how far Bell takes it. I mean, I'd reckon that the longest plays of Le'Veon Bell's career have pretty much all come on passes, whether they've been dump-offs or screens or plays like this. This was something that the Jets did not do enough of. We talked about screens. We talked about dump-offs, but just design throws to Le'Veon Bell, not even out wide, just as a running back. You have one of the best receiving backs in the league, and they didn't utilize it. This is I think the next play is a little swing pass that they called in week 1. I think it was like 3rd and 1, maybe.
I believe this was third and 3, I think.
Okay, it might have been 3rd and 3. So not an angle route. It's a completely different play, but it's just a design throw to Le'Veon Bell, and it's getting it to him in open space. It's like when Le'Veon Bell had no space the whole season, more plays like this. And it's not a flashy play, but again, it's one, it's a first down, and 2, you just get to see how good Le'Veon Bell is at making men miss. And I think that was something we saw a lot of in the Bills game because he was playing pretty well in this game. But Gase, I felt like, did a better job of feeding Le'Veon Bell in more creative ways than just runs up the middle. And I felt like it almost got – I don't want to say that he got almost lazier in his deployment of Le'Veon Bell, but it was less creative. And again, there's excuses after excuses that you can make for the reasons why Gase didn't utilize some of the things we talked about. First of all, he did try at times. I mean, we have plays for each of these circumstances, and he did utilize them at times. But again, most of it comes down to the offensive line as to why we didn't see more of these, flexing Le'Veon Bell out wide and running him outside. But this is something that we're going to have to see more of in 2020 if we want to see a positive season from Le'Veon Bell. I mean, obviously the improved blocking will help his running, hopefully his yards per attempt. But if you want to fully utilize Le'Veon Bell's potential, you have to use him in a multitude of ways, but especially throwing in the football.
Yeah, this is a really good angle route from him, and that's something the Jets definitely did not use him too much on. I I'm not sure he caught any passes on angle routes for the Jets this year. Maybe one comes to mind if I'm remembering correctly, but definitely not a lot of it. And it's not that it's something that, even the best receiving backs do a ton of, but still, it's just something that, anyone who plays Madden knows how deadly that can be. But even in real football, so just on this play right here, that linebacker probably holds Bell after he toasts him so good. That's probably a hold that didn't get called, but he still beats him. Roethlisberger, as you said, makes a great throw. And he shows a little bit of breakaway speed there to get a 40-plus yard gain. But then on this play, swing pass out to the right, shows you exactly what he does. Make a man miss, pick up the first down. Yeah, it's only 5 yards in the stat sheet, but it's a third down conversion. Doesn't get much bigger than that. So these are the type of things he could do really well when he gets the ball out in space as a receiver. He did force 18 broken tackles as a receiver this year, which was the 6th most among running backs. So he did a pretty good job in that department.
Yeah, I think if you had to make a thesis from what we've seen, some of the stuff we like in Pittsburgh, and I'll just go all the way back to begin as well. We talk a little bit. Some of the stuff that we saw in Pittsburgh that we want to see him do more of, and look, we saw some of it in New York. It would be, one, I guess the broad topic would be using Le'Veon Bell as a receiver. Whether that's out of the backfield on checking it down to him, design plays like we just saw, screens, flexing him out wide at receiver. He has a pretty extensive route tree for a running back, and you just talked about the amount of missed tackles he had.
Yeah, I mean, look at what we've just seen him do in this video. We saw him do 2 out and ups. We saw a swing pass. We saw an angle route. We saw him go up the seam. We saw him do a post. This guy has the route tree.
Right, exactly. I mean, you could make an argument that he has a better route tree than Robbie Anderson as a rookie. But yeah, I mean, I just think it would be that. It would be use him as a receiver, get him in open space, and be creative. And I think a lot of that, as you can see, will come down to the blocking. I think, look, it was the obviously the key to the Jets 2019 season, but it's going to be the key to the Jets 2020 season is can they protect Sam Darnold, and can the blocking open up plays for Le'Veon Bell? And if those things happen, look, the Jets don't need a superstar receiver right now. Obviously, that's something that the Jets are going to want to continue to surround Sam Darnold with weapons. Hopefully, Denzel Mims can be that number one. Hopefully, Brashad Perriman or Josh Dotson or even Jameis Crowder, take steps and can step into that role. Hopefully, guys like Chris Herndon, whatever. But you have Le'Veon Bell. You do have a top-tier weapon. And so if you can protect Sam Darnold and give him time and utilize Le'Veon well in a multitude of ways and what he brings, and especially the way he's able to keep an offense ahead of the sticks, which is something that I think will really help Adam Gase. As we saw, anytime he was getting his offense in rhythm, where it was, a second and 7, honestly, 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, it was really when we saw the Jets get in these long stretches of, stuff on first down, incomplete on second down, 3rd and 10, or penalty on first down. Now you're in 1st and 20. I mean, look, and the Jets have obviously, made an effort on signing offensive linemen with low penalties as well, because they want to avoid negative plays like that. You have a guy in Le'Veon Bell, though, who can really capitalize on what I would say is probably the most important thing an offense could do, and that's stay ahead of the sticks in a game of inches. And Le'Veon Bell is a master at that. And that's something that I think Adam Gase, with improved blocking, can really look forward to taking advantage of.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, 1.2 yards before contact for Bell in 2019. That was 44th out of 45 qualified running backs, and the only guy that was worse than him was Peyton Barber with the Buccaneers, and he was more of a situational kind of shared workload guy. So among number one backs, Bell had by far the worst yards before contact average in the league. So he was not getting a lot created for him, to put it lightly. So it really all comes down to whether or not they can improve that offensive line. But at the same time, I think Adam Gase can do a better job of featuring Le'Veon Bell, and again, will give him, the very fair and real excuse of the offensive line not being able to consistently block on screens out on the edge, as well as you need them to be able to run some of these creative plays. But it would be good to see, and again, we'll also see, how healthy, how productive is Chris Herndon, how does Denzel Mims come in, Brashad Perriman, a lot of things that we don't know yet. But it would be great to see the Jets really emphasize getting Bell the ball in creative ways, especially in the passing game, where he's proven to be one of the best ever at his position to do it. So blocking is the biggest thing when it comes to unlocking Bell. We've seen so many examples from every other offensive position about how he was let down in 2019. But he's a very talented player. He still was in 2019. He still has a lot of skills that most players at his position do not. He does the things he can control really well, doesn't turn the ball over, pass protects well, doesn't drop passes, only had 3 drops over 66 receptions in 2019, which is really good. So he does the things he can control well, still very talented, makes people miss, a very expanded route tree for a running back. So he is a special player, still is, regardless of his stats. So it will be a huge X factor for the Jets. Can this team block well enough to unlock him? Because as I said earlier, I think the best way to summarize his skill set as a rusher is that he's going to exponentially get better with the offensive line because his best trait is taking advantage of what the line does for him. The more they're doing, the more he's going to do. And obviously that's true for any running back. They'll be more productive the better the blocking is. But again, I think it's exponential with Bell because the more you're doing, he's just going to take advantage of it at a higher portion of the time than most other running backs do. And really, as we've said numerous times, as you just said, keep the offense ahead of the chains. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of Bell in 2020. He's really going to help Darnold and this offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've pretty much outlined in this video that, maybe in his athletic profile, there might have been some slight regression that happens to all running backs. I mean, that's debatable. You could make a case for it, but you can also make a case that this was pretty much entirely what we just pointed out in this video. But we at least showed that the reason he did not have a successful 2019 season was not regression on his end. A lot of it had to do with the situation that he was in. Michael, as far as your expectations for Le'Veon Bell in 2020, I guess kind of what your thoughts, what you're hoping for, what you're expecting, and kind of a ceiling floor type of outlook for Le'Veon Bell in 2020, which will most likely be his final season as a New York Jet. I mean, even if he goes to a Pro Bowl, there is an out after the season. If he's going to a Pro Bowl, it's most likely Adam Gase is going to be back, and it just doesn't seem like Adam Gase or Joe Douglas believe in paying a running back. So this is most likely Bell's last season in 2020. So how can he make the most of it? What are you expecting? What's his ceiling? What's his floor? Just kind of your outlook for Le'Veon Bell in 2020.
I would say from a production standpoint, it really just comes down to efficiency. I think the volume they use him is pretty fair, what you would like to see out of him. He averaged 16.3 carries a game. That was a career low, but his Pittsburgh average was about 20 a game. So obviously that will go up if the Jets are leading more because, the Jets were not doing a whole lot of that, especially early in the season. So, he'll get more carries if the Jets are running the clock out more. But it just comes down to, 3.2 yards per attempt is not going to cut it. So hopefully if they run block better, he can – again, he's not going to break off many big runs. He still hasn't had a 30-plus yarder in the regular season at least since 2016. So it's not about that. It's just about, minimizing those stuffs. That's something he did better than anyone in Pittsburgh. So we know he's capable of it. Then with the Jets, he was stuffed, about as much as anyone else in the league. So getting those stuffs down, hopefully getting his yards per carry up to at least 4, hopefully a little bit more than that. But getting those stuffs down is the biggest part of that. Those -1, 0, 1 yard runs, let's get those up to 3, 4, 5 yard runs. And I think that would be huge for the Jets. And then in the receiving game, he did average 4.4 catches a game. I think I would like to see that a little bit higher. His final 2 seasons in Pittsburgh, he averaged 6.3 2016 and 5.7 in 2017. So maybe getting up to at least 5 receptions a game. And the efficiency is a big thing as well. With the Steelers, he picked up a first down on 31% of his targets. With the Jets, that rate was much lower. He only picked up a first down on 26%. And also his yards per target was down from 6.7 to 5.9. So his efficiency was about average with the Jets as a receiver. With the Steelers, it was very good. So to get that up as well would be very beneficial. And again, I think that just comes down to getting him in more creative situations, allowing him to run more routes. And as you said, that probably comes down to better protection, having more confidence, and being able to use him out wide and, actually have the time to be able to get him the ball. So I think efficiency is a big thing with, any offense in the league, really any position on either side of the ball. But I think his amount of touches hopefully should go up a little bit. And it also depends on how well the new players acclimate, which is a big question mark considering the lack of training camp and practice. But I think the biggest thing is that you want to see is receiving efficiency get up to closer to the elite levels it was with the Steelers, and his rushing just at least get to that respectable level.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I think that, there's been some rumors about Gase wanting to use more of a run by committee approach in 2020 with, the additions of Frank Gore and Michael Pirine. I'm all for, giving Le'Veon Bell some rest and not having to ride him into the ground. I understand that he's a guy that you want to have playing well into November and December, because hopefully the Jets will be playing meaningful games those months. But I think at the same time, he is a guy who really wears a defense down over the course of a game. I didn't necessarily, Gase at times started to use this approach where he would have Bell in for a whole series and then he would take him out and have Powell in for a whole series. I think you can use a little bit more variety. I think you can have Bell in on first down, take him out second down, and put him back in on third down or whatnot. I think Frank Gore will be, a fine – I mean, obviously, I like what Frank Gore is going to bring to the locker room and giving the Jets kind of their version of a Steve McClendon on the offensive side of the ball, just a veteran leader that they can lean on. But I think, he's a guy that's kind of just going to run straight ahead and get you maybe 2 or 3 yards. He's not really a home run hitter or anything. He can give Le'Veon Bell some breaks on short yardage situations, so maybe he doesn't have to take as much of a beating. And Pirine is a guy that, a great receiver, has a kind of a similar skill set to Bilal Powell. But he's a rookie. So I agree with you. I think that Le'Veon Bell is going to have a lot of touches in 2020. I do think they will actually increase, like you said, because I think the Jets will hopefully be leading in more games. So they will have more opportunities to run the ball. But yeah, I mean, I think, if he's getting around 80 catches next season, I think that would be around, I think that would be exactly 5. Yeah, that would be 5 catches a game, which is, I think, what you want to get him. So 80 to 100 catches is kind of the threshold you want to get him receiving, assuming he plays all 16 games. I think you want to aim for about 1,500 all-purpose yards, but I mean, that's relatively high. But, if you're feeding him the ball a lot as a receiver, it's not, impossible. He doesn't need to be 1,000-yard rusher, I guess. So maybe 1,400 yards all-purpose. He doesn't need to be 1,000-yard rusher in my mind. I think you're right. It's the key for Le'Veon Bell is efficiency. I think we did see him far too many times, and maybe this will point to the positives of having more of a running back by committee approach. We saw him take kind of an unnecessary beating in some games where it was just, especially those early season games against the Browns and the Eagles and the Patriots, where he was just getting run right into, 3 guys at the line of scrimmage, and just that takes a toll on your body. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just hoping that the improved offensive line, I think that's the biggest thing, and even improved blocking at the tight end receiver positions with, Chris Herndon coming back, hopefully the development of Trayvon Wesco, bringing in Denzel Mims and even Brashad Perriman, I think, and obviously the whole blocking as a whole, and hopefully the involvement of Sam Darnold to be able to check down to Le'Veon Bell, I think, and another season in Adam Gase's system, I think all of those things will contribute to a better and improved season in Le'Veon Bell. I'm not just trying to be an optimist. At his floor, I see him still having a better season than he did last year. I think as floor would be getting injured, I would say. But assuming he plays all 16 games, I think you will see an improvement from last year, unless the offensive line is absolutely terrible again. But if the offensive line can just get to competent level, I think you'll see him, having more of those 80 yards rushing a game and less of those like 30 or 40 yards rushing a game, types of games. I think you'll see him really improve on his production. He might not be the same player that he was in 2015 or 2016, but he's still a damn good player and probably the best player on the Jets offensive side of the ball, unless Darnold takes, massive leaps. So I think some Jets fans have given up on Le'Veon Bell, especially when you hear the talks that he won't probably be back in 2021, but don't get it twisted. He's still a damn good player, and his style of player can play in this league a long time. Running backs fade, but the running backs that rely a lot on their speed and their quickness and their physical attributes, those are the ones that you're out of the league by 30 or 32. Le'Veon Bell, when you talk about his patience and his vision and what he can do in open space, his ability as a pass catcher, he's a guy who has 5 to 7 more years in this league. Probably 5 more years in this league. Not everybody's Frank Gore. But I'm looking forward to a better year in 2020. I think, especially with the lack of a Jets having a number one receiver, he's going to have, he's going to have to be the man for the Jets. So let's hope he's training, not just playing Super Smash Bros, because that's all I'm seeing from his Instagram account so far. But yeah, I'm not just trying to look at this through green tinted colored goggles. As you'll see, as we do more of these player reviews, I do feel if he's healthy, you'll see an uptick in his production this year.
Yeah, he definitely should be improved. As long as you said, the offensive line is, doesn't even have to be average. It just has to be a decent step up from where it was last year. And you should really start to see him bring to the table what I was most hoping to see him bring to the table. And that's help make Darnold's life easier by making those third downs, those second downs shorter, just based on being able to make the first man miss, pick the right hole, take advantage of the blocking, to make the quarterback's life easier and the play caller's life easier as well. So he'll continue to bring to the table all the controllable things that he does well. And also with better blocking, he should be able to get much closer to where he was in Pittsburgh.
I think all good things we just noted there. And yeah, again, I mean, he can be the quarterback's best friend. He's the true definition. If you're going to choose a running back to pair with a young quarterback, Le'Veon Bell, I mean, look, you want a good offensive line with him to really maximize his skill set. But everything that he brings to the table, keeping you ahead of the sticks, a great dump off option, a great receiver. He can be perfect for Sam Darnold in this offense if they can utilize him right. All comes down to the blocking, but as we said, really excited to see him in 2020. And that notion that he regressed, I think, is or drastically regressed and had a terrible season, I think, as we just showed, is vastly mistaken. You can follow us at CYJ Pod on Twitter. I run that account, but you can follow Michael, the big shot, with over 10,000 followers at Michael_Nania. You can follow myself at Ben W. Blessington. You can find this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, iTunes or Spotify. We really appreciate any new ratings or reviews on iTunes. That really just kind of helps our podcast grow. You can find us on JetX, jetx.com, or JetXFactor, sorry. .com. That is where our podcasts are all posted, and especially these videos that we've been doing, a lot of the film sessions. This can be listened to primarily through audio, but we'll have the video up on YouTube so everybody can see what we're looking at when we're talking about it. And yeah, I think that'll do it for us. Michael, any last words before we go?
I would just say for our next episode, let's go tune in, eye emoji, as Le'Veon Bell himself just tweeted 2 minutes ago.
Ooh, wonder what that's about. I did see that he talked about he was excited for the offensive line. Do you think that was just like a Smash Bros DLC, or do you think maybe
it's about Smash Bros? He's quoting somebody as per usual. But at least we have a good nickname for him if he plays well. We're gonna call him Mega Man.
That's not bad. I mean, that is his go-to character. I will say, I mean, I was saying that as a joke, but and Michael and I were talking about this earlier. Last season, we saw like a training video from Le'Veon Bell every day, and it was getting me hyped up. And I don't know if it's just the quarantine or maybe he's just not posting on social media, but now I'm seeing a Smash Bros video every day. So maybe I should have factored that into my opinion that his production will increase. But no, I think he's hopefully just using that as free time. But anyways, that'll do it for us. Again, we really appreciate you listening or watching. We had a lot of fun doing this, and we look forward to doing more of these. On different players. Obviously we have to talk on Sam Darnold, Jamal Adams. There's a lot of players that we are looking forward, Quentin Williams, that we're looking forward to doing these kind of deep dives on individually, especially in these, the summer where there's not much going on. We do expect to have some more film sessions / interviews with some players or some former players even coming. And then we'll probably have a normal podcast when there's a little bit more news. Obviously the Jets signed Joe Flacco. We still haven't really talked about Frank Gore really. Maybe the Jets will sign Logan Ryan or Larry Warford. We're just kind of waiting as we get closer to training camp. We'll have like kind of an update, talk about the new schedule, I guess, podcast. Right now, we figured the most interesting content was kind of just these kind of longer pieces. So yeah, looking forward to it. Again, everybody stay healthy, stay safe. I hope everybody's doing well. We'll be back next week with another one of these deep dives. And everybody, go Jets, and let's hope there's football this year.
One over the middle. It's tipped, and it's intercepted. C.J. Mosley's got it. Runs right to the 10. 5. Touchdown. Jones. That's a taken away by Jamal Adams. And he is in for a Jets doing it all for the Jets.